Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran kathira. فقال تعالى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. My dear brothers and sisters, we are on the 6th of the series of lectures related to 2021 challenges and solutions. And today I'm going to talk to you about the focus on science that going forward from this year is going to increase. And this will be in two parts, inshallah, this Juma and next Juma. The fourth biggest challenge going forward from 2021 is the rapid development of science. Scientific development in medical research gave us the COVID vaccine, where thanks to leveraging what is known and without taking shortcuts, the vaccine was developed in record time, and we hope and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it a means of blessing to deliver us all from this pandemic. There are many examples of how medical research has totally changed the face of healthcare and the huge impact it has had on life quality all over the world. Smallpox, for example, has now been eradicated, and programs are currently underway to eradicate poliomyelitis and guinea worm disease. In my childhood, we used to take anti-smallpox vaccines every year. We don't need to take them anymore because the disease is gone. Vaccination has successfully interrupted circulation of poliomyelitis, measles, rubella, and has drastically reduced the incidence of foot and mouth disease and canine rabies. Sadly, it appears that foot-in-mouth disease seems to have no cure, and especially as politicians seem to be particularly susceptible to it. Talking about stem cell research, one of the effects of it is organ regeneration and its potential impact on geriatric life quality, not lifespans, because that is determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This will totally alter our view of disease. We can realistically, inshallah, look forward to the time when cancer will be eliminated and the blind will be able to see and people will be able to get new hearts. However, will those who are now able to see look upon a world that will be a delight to gaze upon, or will it make them wish to return to their earlier state? Will the new hearts be filled with love and the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or with the same garbage of hatred and discrimination? Will better life quality for the elderly be an asset or a liability if it is not accompanied with the economic wherewithal to live comfortably, values of respect for elders, children who see their parents and elders as an asset and not a liability, and a society that gives meaning to your life? These are not questions that science can answer, but Islam can. What we eat will change thanks to cultured meat. Anyone for cricket steaks? I'm not joking. That cricket is the cheapest source of pure protein currently known. What about eating cultured chicken, which was never born in the traditional sense and not slaughtered because it never lived? A single cell is developed into a chicken breast or a chicken leg. Is it halal? Once again, this is not an exhaustive list, but something to give you some food for thought. about how education needs to change to prepare especially our scholars who understand science enough to be able to adjudicate on these matters. Finally, one of the finest, most inspiring achievements of humanity in recent times, successfully landing a robot on a planet 132 million miles, 200 million kilometers away, using another robot and with no real-time ability to make any corrections. I don't know how many of you watched that, and if not, I don't know why not. It is certainly far more important and useful than watching Super Bowl or World Cup or even, forgive me, Ertugrul. It is all a matter of what we give importance to. As parents, you might like to think of how this influences your children and what they will aspire to in their lives. I want you to do two things. Watch the several videos on the link that I have given you here in this text of this khutbah with your whole family. And on the NASA site, please look at the list of people who are behind this amazing achievement. And when you finish reading the names, ask yourself what is missing and whether you care. Do you even care? The time to pretend that the world revolves around us is gone. The world never did, and it doesn't now. Awake and act or perish. That's the reality. The tragedy of our situation is that though we have a rich history of scientific development, it is mostly relegated to stories and exhibitions of the achievements of Muslim scientists, mostly from Andalusia, between the 9th and the 12th centuries. We conveniently don't ask the question, what happened since then? Why is it that when Muslims contributed so much to the world of scientific development, then in the last 110 years, only 2 Muslims won the Nobel Prize for Science? In a study done about the reading habits of Arabs today, it is quoted, the average Arab child reads 6 minutes in a year in comparison to 12,000 minutes of its Western counterpart. It is also reported that an Arab individual on average reads a quarter of a page a year compared to 11 books read by Americans and 7 books by the British per year. If we adopt the minimum average time that youth spends on the internet, that gives us 365 hours a year, 1 hour a day, which is far less than what actually is spent. But let's take with that. So it's 365 hours a year. And if we compare that with the average time an individual Arab spends reading, that is 6 minutes per year. Then the difference between the two becomes clear, and it shows how the internet has taken over our lives. Think about that. If that internet time is being spent on doing some research or something worthwhile and useful, it would be something, but majority of that time, if not all of it, is spent on social media. If these had been people, when we were talking about the Arabs, I mean Arabs and Muslims, if we had been people who had never done anything worthwhile, like many others, it would not be remarkable. But for people who gave 60% of the names of stars to the world, who mapped the heavens, and whose contribution started and fueled the Renaissance in Europe, it is both astonishing and tragic. Cordoba was known to be a place which had 100% literacy and which had more books in its libraries than all the libraries in the world combined. At a time when in the rest of Europe, even most monarchs, kings, and the nobility could not read and write, in Cordoba, Stable hands and gardeners wrote poetry. My brothers and sisters, I remind you and myself, the great civilizations are never destroyed from the outside. They collapse inwards when they don't deal with their internal diseases. Our internal disease is ignorance. For people whose religion is based on a book, the book of Allah, and in which the first word revealed was Iqra, read. To be in a state where our children, our future, read for 6 minutes in a year is worse than getting a report of being in the terminal stage of pancreatic cancer. Because in cancer, only you die. In this case, the whole nation dies. Instead of appreciating science as the lens to see the signs of Allah, we are hostile to it. We denigrate science, but we run to doctors if we get sick. We must change urgently. Think about this. If a father had taken his young son or daughter to the Geneva Motor Show in 2015, they would have seen the highlight of the show, which was the Aston Martin Vulcan with a 7-liter V12 engine, a 6-speed sequential gearbox, variable traction control, adjustable suspension, and race-spec tires. What would inspire that child? And what kind of aspirations would that child have seeing state-of-the-art, high-precision engineering? Now, if the same parent and his children had gone to the Automechanica Dubai in 2016, the following year, they would have seen the gold-plated Nissan R35 GTR worth $1 million as the center of attraction. Now, what would inspire that child in Dubai, and what kind of aspirations would that child have in this case? What does that tell you about the focus of the two societies? One focused on high precision engineering, the other focused on bling. Who wins? There is among us a strange and tragic hostility towards science, which is even encouraged by our traditional scholars, who treat science as if it is from shaitan. Many of them actively discourage university education and the practice of the scientific method of investigation and searching for evidence before believing anything. And needless to say, there is perhaps not a single madrasa or Darul Uloom where science is taught seriously. I know some make a pretense of teaching it because the country where they are located insists on it, but when have you ever heard of a scientist come out of a madrasa? But then, when we have a system in which to become a teacher, a formal teaching qualification and knowledge of child psychology is not required, what else can you expect? Amazingly, our madrasa system is the only one in the world where teachers have no formal training in teaching, no lesson plans, no appraisals, no quality checks. Yet, we call it education. This is tragic because all those Muslim scientists whose names we take as pioneers in science came out of madaris. What we know today as the scientific method was pioneered by Muslims and used both in science as well as theology, most famously in the study of the ahadith of Rasulullah. Yet today, it is as if we are looking at two enemy camps. This hostility comes out of gross ignorance on both sides about what the other party does and how that is inherently beneficial for both. This is the result of ignoring each other for 7 centuries or more instead of understanding and appreciating. Ignorance breeds fear and that hatred. The problem lies with how we address the two: scientific temperament and method, and revelation, which is religious thought. Scientific temperament consists of curiosity, questioning, reasoning, dissent, actively encouraging dissent, experimenting, documenting, measuring, comparison, collecting evidence, conceptualizing and theorizing, and changing those theories when new evidence emerges. It consists of an attitude of openness, encouraging and accepting dissent, knowing that those who disagree help you to look at areas in your own blind spot, which is critical for you. It consists of inventing, innovating, devising new methods, tools, and techniques to arrive at physically measurable results. All this happens because the scientific temperament and method begins with the following three premises. Number one, I don't know. Number two, I will believe only what I can measure or have empirical evidence for. That is, what I can touch and hear and feel or measure with tools. And number three, I may be wrong. And so I am forever open to changing my theory if I am shown evidence to the contrary. To change a theory, even to trash it totally and accept a new one, is perfectly normal in the realm of science. Nobody's ego is hooked to his theory, and any scientist worth the name may defend his theory, but if he is presented with evidence to the contrary, he sees it as a sign of development and progress and will accept it. Religious thought is based on what seems to be the opposite of this. I'm not saying it is, I'm saying it looks like that. And I'll tell you why it looks like that. Islam is based on direct revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala jalla jalaluhu. The Quran is the speech of Allah as revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and communicated to us by him alayhi salam. As such, since the Quran is the actual speech of Allah, the premises on which it is approached are different from those which define science. That is not to say that the Quran or its study is unscientific in the derogatory sense that this term is usually meant, but that the nature of the science of the Quran is different. The study of the Quran is based on these three premises. One, we believe that this is the actual speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and therefore it is the truth in which there is no doubt. Number two, we believe what we read without asking how, bila kaif. Number three, that the Quran deals with the unperceivable, al-ghaib, not just the unseen. And that's a wrong translation of al-ghaib. The Quran deals with the unperceivable and is the means of connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As such, empirical evidence is not necessary in the presence of the word of Allah. Theorizing, philosophizing, conjecture, and imagining are all discouraged, even prohibited in matters that relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and al-ghaib, the unperceivable. This sometimes gives the impression of ulama, theologians, being rigid and closed-minded, and that misunderstanding is the root cause of the antagonistic attitude on both sides. But it is reasonable and logical. They are actually reasonable and logical. Questioning in any discipline demands that it be done within the framework of the discipline. So also in Islam, every question is welcome, provided it is asked respecting the rules of inquiry. This is not the sign of an unscientific temperament, but of recognizing the boundaries and limitations of inquiry. We don't inquire where there is no chance of getting any answer because the revelation, the wahi, has stopped and because it is not possible to experiment or search for empirical evidence in an area which is unperceivable. This is directly in keeping with the scientific method where you cannot conduct an experiment, for example, to measure how much you love your wife and thank Allah for small mercies. Science is the tool by which we can see the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala up close. There are two things, the khudrat of Allah and the sunnat of Allah. One is Allah's power which has no boundaries, His khudrat, and the other is the system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created by which His creation functions. One is the Quran and all the mu'jazat, the miracles that are mentioned in it. The other is called physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, and everything that people who don't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call laws of nature and so on. One tells you the why of things. The other one tells you the how. Both are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and are intrinsically interrelated. There is no conflict between the two. All the ayat that we quote today in Dawah about embryology and geology and astronomy and so on are all scientific statements but are ayat of the Quran. All of them were in Al-Ghaib at the time they were revealed. But today, thanks to science, we can see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. This confirms the truth that to study the principles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established in the creation of the universe is not anti-Islam, but a part of Islam. But we Muslims sadly have created a gap, even a gulf, between the two to our own detriment. Let us see what Islam says about science. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us about the relationship between theology and science, where He said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. In Surah Al-Adnan, Allah said, which means, verily in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of the day and the night, of the night and the day, there are indeed signs for people of understanding. Those who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala standing, sitting and lying down on their sides, and who deeply think about the creation of the heavens and the earth. And they say, our Rabb, you have not created all of this without purpose. Glory to you, exalted are you above all that they associate with you as partners. Give us salvation from the torment of the fire. There can be nothing clearer than this about the importance of science in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us what to teach and how to teach it. It is very unfortunate that those who read this ayah, taught it, memorized it, but didn't stop to ask. Why is it that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned two things, His dhikr and research in His creation, we only talk about one and not the other? That is how universities teach about the creation as if there is no creator, and our madaris teach about the creator as if there is no creation. Both are bad, but the latter is worse because it is we who received the ayah, we who read it and memorized it, yet we did not act on it. We didn't study science, and so we remained ignorant of it. That made us suspicious of science, especially because its principles are so different from our theological principles, and we started to fear it and to disparage and deprecate and denigrate it. Scientists, on the other hand, remained ignorant about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they looked down upon us and considered us to be insular, isolationist, ignorant and backward. If we integrate our teaching, knowledge will flower as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended it to. And we will use science to see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and use it to fill our hearts with His glory and majesty. Science is the tool to view the creation of Allah by the lens that we see it with, which is our heart. Inshallah, we'll talk more about this next Jummah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Jalla Jalaluhu to enable us to understand science in the right perspective and to understand the relationship between science and the Quran, and to be able to create spaces, to create schools in which we can teach science in a way which opens the eyes to the glory and majesty of Allah and fills the hearts with His nur and with His glory and majesty. وصلى الله على نبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.